Okay, so I'm going to share. We now have a restaurant that feeds people for free with dignity and respect. It's exquisite. Looks like any restaurant that any of you would want to go to, because that's exactly what it is. It's a beautiful space. A couple of weeks ago, so lunch is free to anyone who walks in. We do not ask a question. All we do is say, "What is your name? Please come on in." And a guy walked in, shaved head, tats all over his body, looked a little uncomfortable. And by now, the restaurant is 2 years old. People come and actually sit together, but in the beginning, they don't go to a communal table. So we directed him, and all the service staff are volunteers. But we do have a social worker because we're dealing with all sorts of challenges. So this guy, we suggested he sit at the little window bar where there was no one next to him and he could look out. And his first course was served to him, and he looked a little uncomfortable. So the volunteer went over to the social worker and said, maybe he needs something. So when she went with his second course, his main course, she put it down and she put her arm on his shoulder and said, "Is everything okay with you?" And he turned around and looked at her and said, "I came out of prison a couple of weeks ago, and being in this space, now I know why. Now I know that I'm worth something. Did I know 20 years ago that anything like that was possible? Absolutely not. I had a problem in my business. I was feeding people. I was putting on beautiful events just like this. When we go out at tea, there's plenty food. And at every one of my events, there was food left over. And one time I did an event for 1,000 people, and I turned it into a Roman banquet. And the most important thing about a banquet is that there are kegs of wine and barrels of beer. But I had so much food because I wanted to combat that notion that people would get drunk and not eat. But they went for the booze. And they were pissed and drunk within such a short while. And I had thousands of kilos of food left over. And generally at my events, 3 a.m, you threw out what you had. I was the biggest waste of food because I didn't have a solution. And that night, I thought, what was I going to do with this food? Piled it into a van and took it to a place I'd heard about and seen I'd never been to. And that was the beginning of my rogue food rescue life. I didn't know this would be my calling. I didn't know this would become my journey, my destiny. But it became apparent because I started rescuing more and more food. So I cannot say, so that moment was a moment that changed my life. But I kind of stumbled into this journey, and I share that because finding purpose and meaning in life is not always so apparent. You know, if I had a penny for every time people had come to me and said, how do I find my purpose and how do I find my meaning? I wish I could say it's on aisle 3 in the supermarket, right in the middle, but actually it's in a place much closer. It's in ourselves and when we look in the mirror and what brings us joy. And so, to go back to that question, I feel blessed that I stumbled into what it is. And one of the clues is perhaps you start solving some of the problems that we see instead of saying, I wish somebody else would do that. I don't know why I chose to do that or had the courage or just thought it was my problem to solve.